They had already signed my name by the time I found the right door. I saw it through the glass. My name on a signature line, in handwriting that wasn't mine. A young man in a tie came out and put his back against the door. "Mrs. Hux, you're not a party to this. That's my mother's house." "Ma'am, this closing started at 10. He looked at his watch. "Funds go out at 4. 6 hours. That was the whole clock I had. To tell you how I ended up standing in that parking lot, I have to back up. I'm Yvette Hux, and I'm 42 years old. I've got 23 years in the Marine Corps. Nobody I'm related to has ever once asked what I do in it. That isn't a complaint. It's just the shape of us. I run wire, and I hand people radios. That's the trade. My mother's house sits on Bell Fork Road here in Jacksonville, North Carolina. Brick 1 story, a carport my father walled in himself the summer I turned 9. She died 14 years ago. Her will cut the house in half to my father, half to me. I never moved back into it. My daddy was in that kitchen, and I wasn't going to put a man out of his own kitchen over a piece of paper. But I kept the front door key. Plain brass on a plain steel ring in my left pocket. That key has been through 2 duty stations and 1 divorce. My father married Roxanne 6 years after we buried my mother. Let me be fair about her. She fed him. She drove him to the eye doctor in Kinston. When he started leaving the truck running out in the yard, she's the one who noticed. 2 years ago, he went up to a memory care hall in New Bern. He knows my voice on the phone about half the time. Roxanne holds his power of attorney, and it's a real one. He signed it in front of 2 witnesses back when he still could, and I've never had a word to say against that paper. It's the other paper I'm here about. The first summer she was in that house, I came home on leave and stopped at the screen door with a casserole dish in my hands. A woman sat across the table from her with a folder. Real estate, and you can hear that in a voice. And your husband's daughter? Yvette. She'd have to be at the table, too. Yvette's the easy one. Even so, ma'am. She'll sign. She always signs. I stood on that step for a good 10 seconds. Then I knocked, and everybody smiled, and I put the dish on the counter. I never brought it up. Not that night, not for 6 years. Here's what happens when people call you easy for 20 years. You start hearing it as a compliment. Then one morning somebody uses it as a plan. Now let me take you back to that door. The office sat on Western Boulevard, in a strip between a nail salon and a phone store. I'd come straight off a field problem, utilities boots cover in my cargo pocket because I was inside a building. I got there at 10:30, and I asked for my stepmother by name. She's in the back. Then I need to be in the back. Ma'am, I can't do that. Whose closing is it? I'm not allowed to say. It's my mother's house. Yes, ma'am. I stood at the glass anyway, and that's where I saw the page. A woman at the table lifted it so the man across from her could look at it. Her mouth was moving. I couldn't hear one word through that door. The bottom of that page carried a block of print. A stamped circle pressed hard enough to lift the paper, a name under the stamp that wasn't mine and wasn't Roxanne's. And out in the margin, in pencil, somebody had written a number. 4 digits. That's every bit of it I got. The woman turned the page face down, slid it under a folder, and the man in the tie stepped square into my line of sight. Ma'am? Whose name is on that stamp? You'll need to speak with an attorney. I'm asking you what's on the bottom of that page. Ma'am, please. Is that my name on the line? He didn't answer. That was an answer. So I waited outside. 42 years old in a parking lot, and 8 years old in my chest. I didn't know what a notary block was that morning, and I'll own that. I'd put my hand on 100 of them in 23 years, and never once looked at the bottom of the page. I thought the stamp was decoration. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, a woman I had never met would set a thin book on a witness stand and open it flat. But at 10:30, I was standing on wet asphalt with a phone against my ear counting rings. 11. Nobody picked up, and nobody was ever going to. And here's the part I still can't set down. 6 hours wasn't the problem, because I could have had 6 weeks. I had nothing to hand anybody. You can't walk into a room and hold up the absence of a thing. That was the whole bet. Not that I'd fold, but that I'd have nothing. By 11, I'd called 4 numbers and reached one human being. 71 years old. Wrote wills 2 doors down from the courthouse. And the first thing out of her mouth had nothing to do with my name. Honey. Whose stamp was it? Let me go back further than that morning, because the morning isn't where this started. It started at a lawyer's table 14 years ago, 3 weeks after we buried my mother, with me on a speakerphone in a barracks room in California. Mrs. Hux, can you hear me? Yes, sir. Your mother left the house in 2 halves, half to your father, half to you. All right. Do you have questions? No, sir. Most people have questions. He's my daddy. It's his house. That was it. And it took 4 minutes. My mother had one thing to leave in this world, and she cut it exactly down the middle, and I signed nothing because there was nothing to sign. I've thought about those 4 minutes a lot since. For 8 years, nothing happened because nothing needed to. My father lived there, and I sent money at Christmas. My daughter got hauled to that carport on every leave I had. Then Roxanne came, and for a while, she was good news. I mean that. My father was 70 and eating cereal for supper. She put a garden in. She got him going to church again. The first Sunday I saw him in a pressed shirt, I could have hugged her neck. The first time I heard the story, I was standing in my aunt's driveway out in Richlands. Aunt Sudie is my mother's baby sister. She's 78, and she isn't a gossip. That's why it went in so deep. I hate to be the one. The one about what? About the house, honey. What about the house? Roxanne says you signed your half over. Years back. I laughed. That's the truth. I stood in that driveway and laughed at her. I've never signed anything. She said you needed money. When? She didn't say when. Aunt Sudie, look at me. I know it. I have never signed one thing about that house. I believe you. Then she patted my arm and gave me the sentence that has stayed with me ever since. Well, she's got it wrote down somewhere, I reckon. She wasn't being cruel. She was being 78 years old in a family where paper wins. I drove home mad, and I stayed mad about 4 days. Then I did what I've done my whole life, which is put a thing in a drawer and shut the drawer. Because look at it from where I stood. Nobody was selling anything. My daddy was alive in his own house. If I called my stepmother a liar over a house that wasn't even for sale, what did I look like? I looked like a woman waiting on a man to die. So I let it be. That was my mistake, and I'm not going to dress it up. The story went around the way stories do in a family. Quiet. At a funeral, at a cookout. Never to my face and never in a room I was standing in. My cousin's wife caught me by the sweet tea at Easter. No hard feelings about the house right off. What about the house? Nothing. Never mind. A boy of about 12 asked me at a fish fry whether I'd sold my mama's place. His mother took him by the elbow before I could get my mouth open. 2 years of that. Here's the thing I want you to hear, because it's the engine of everything that came after. I never once thought about what a story like that is getting ready for. I thought it was talk. It wasn't talk. It was a foundation. When my father went up to New Bern, the visits got hard. He'd know me about 10 minutes, and then his face would go polite. Now, when's Yvette coming? Pretty soon, Daddy. She's in the service, you know. I know it. She don't tell us much. He was right about that. Roxanne was good to him in that hall, and I have to say that too. 4 days a week, every week. Last October, on my way out, she walked me down to the elevator. They're bleeding us up here. How much? $6,000 a month. Goes up in July. He's got the disability money. It isn't enough, Yvette. Then send me the bill. I'll take a piece of it. She pushed the button and watched the button instead of me. There's the house. Then we sell the house. You do that. Roxanne. He needs the money worse than I need a carport. You'd really do that? Call me when you've got a buyer. And that is a true and complete accounting of every conversation I ever had with my stepmother about selling my mother's house. She could have picked up the phone in January. I'd have signed. I'd have driven to any office in this county and signed with a smile on my face. That's the part I'd chew on at 2 o'clock in the morning. She didn't need to forge one single thing. She just didn't want to ask me. The sign went in the yard the week before Thanksgiving. I didn't hear it from her. I heard it from a phone. My cousin sent a picture first, and then he called. Is that y'all's? That's my mother's house. There's a sign in it. I see the sign. You didn't know. I know now. I called Roxanne from my own driveway, with the truck still ticking behind me. You listed it. I was fixing to call you tonight. Roxanne. The man says list before the holidays or you wait till March. That's fine. I told you it was fine. So you're not upset. I'm not upset about the house. I left the other half of that sentence alone. That was a choice. I've made a lot of choices like it. What do you want me to do? The lawyer'll send papers. Send them to my work address. I'm in the field a lot. All right. Roxanne, send them. I heard you. Nothing came. Not one envelope in November, and not one in December. In January, I called the agent's office myself. I'm calling about the Bell Fork property. Are you the buyer or the seller, ma'am? I'm one of the owners. Hold on, let me pull it up. Keys clicking, then a long pause on the line. It shows both owners represented. Represented by who? I can't get into that over the phone. I'm asking who is representing me. If there's a problem, talk to the attorney handling it. Can you give me a name? I'm going to have to let you go, ma'am. She wasn't a criminal. She was a woman with a screen in front of her, and the screen told her everything was fine. Nobody warns you about that part, because there's no villain at the counter. There's just a field that's already been filled in. I called the attorney's office twice that week and left my number twice. Then a training exercise ate 3 weeks of my life, and I let it go. I want to own that. I let it go. The second week of February, Aunt Sudie called me at 9 at night, which she has never done. They set a date. For what? For the sale, honey. Roxanne told the Sunday school. What date? First Thursday in March. I dropped down onto the arm of the couch. My stomach went out from under me. Then I called my stepmother. Here's the whole conversation. Is there a date? For what? For the sale. They're still working on the money. Sudie says the first Thursday in March. Sudie doesn't know what she's talking about. Roxanne, am I signing something or not? The line went quiet for maybe 2 seconds. I have replayed those 2 seconds more times than I want to admit. Nobody needs you to do a thing, Yvette. I heard that as kindness. You've got to understand how easy that was. She'd been telling me for 6 years that I was the easy one, and here she was making it easy. It wasn't kindness. It was a fact. The night before the first Thursday in March, I laid my utilities over the back of a kitchen chair and set my alarm for 20 minutes past 4. My daughter came out of her room at 4:40 in her sock feet because she can hear a coffee maker through a wall. Effie is 8. She has my mother's chin and none of my patience. Is Grandpa's house ours or theirs? I crouched down on the kitchen floor so we'd be eye to eye. It's Grandpa's. And a little bit mine. Then who's the one who says you? I had no answer for that. I gave her a bowl of cereal instead, and I told her Mrs. Pettifer would be there when the bus dropped her off. That was every word my child said about any of it. She never set foot in a courthouse. She never touched a single piece of paper in this story, and I'd have hauled her out of the state before I let anybody stand her up in front of a room full of grown people. Her question was better than anything I came up with all day. Who's the one who says? By 5:30, I was out in the pine flats north of the base, with a cold rain coming sideways, running a link between a battalion command post and a retrans site on a hill. That's my job. Antennas, cable batteries, and 100 people who can't do their jobs until my thing works. At 9 that morning, the lieutenant came around the back of my truck with rain running off his cover. Chief, how long on that second link? 40 minutes. Say again, 40? 40, sir. That's what they call me out there. Chief, it's a billet, not a rank, and it fits in the mouth easy. My family has never called me that. My family calls me Mrs. Hux. At 6 minutes before 10, my phone buzzed in my cargo pocket. It was my cousin again, and it ran 4 words. Aren't you at the closing? I looked at it, and then I looked at it again. Then I walked over to that lieutenant in the rain and asked for something I hadn't asked for in 11 years. Sir, I need to leave the field. Now. Everything all right? No, sir. He studied me for maybe 2 seconds. Go. I'll get somebody on your truck. You already know what happened when I got to that door. By 11, I was sitting in a parking lot with both hands on a steering wheel I wasn't driving. I called Roxanne twice, and I called the agent. I called the attorney's office and got a woman who said he was in a closing, which I already knew because he was in mine. So I drove to the courthouse. And not because I had a plan, because it was the only building in this county where I could think of a single thing to do. There's a line of little offices across the street from it. Insurance bail bonds, and a glass door with gold letters that said Wills and Estates. Hester Boyette was 71 years old and eating a chicken sandwich at her own desk. You're the one that called. Yes, ma'am. Sit down and start at the stamp, I told her. The glass, the page, the circle pressed into the paper, the name that wasn't mine. Was there a number by it? Out in the margin, in pencil. How many digits? 4. She put the sandwich down. All right, now listen to me because we've got about 5 hours. Yes, ma'am. That block at the bottom of the page. You know what it says? No, ma'am. It says a human being stood in front of a commissioned notary, on a day, in a place, and handed over identification. Okay. None of it turns on your handwriting. They'll say it's my handwriting. Let them. Then what do I do? You do not argue the signature, not one word about the signature. Why not? Because that's 2 experts and 11 weeks, and a bill you can't pay. I've got 5 hours. That's right. So what's left? She turned her chair and pointed at a shelf behind her, at a stack of thin books with worn corners. The book. What book? The one that woman is required to keep. What's in it? I asked her. Everything that matters. In order. Such as the date, the hour, what she did, who stood in front of her, and what they handed her. Driver license, passport, military card. She writes the kind, and she writes when it expires. That's a lot for one line. There's one more. Where it happened. I leaned back in that chair, and something in my chest started moving. And they sign it themselves, their own hand. In her book, not on your paper, in her book. So if I never went in there, then there's no line. That's nothing, Miss Boyette. That's an empty space. She tipped her chin down and looked at me past her glasses. Honey, an empty space is the loudest thing in a courtroom. I need to say something about Hester Boyette here because people hear a story like mine and assume some old war horse came out of the woodwork. She never served a day. She'd never been on a base in her life. She wrote wills and small estates, and she'd sat through maybe 300 closings in this county, and she knew what a notary's book was the way a nurse knows a blood pressure cuff. That's all she was, and it was plenty. Can we stop it? We can try. Emergency motion, temporary restraining order. I'll walk it across the street right now. Judge Tillery hears emergencies at 2:30. Money moves at 4. Then we've got an hour and a half of daylight. She pulled a legal pad over and started writing. I need your identification for the affidavit. I dug my card out of my blouse pocket. She held it a beat longer than she had to. Then she handed it back and wrote without saying one word about it. I thought nothing of it at the time. I had other things on my mind. Miss Boyette. What if she doesn't come? Who? The woman on the stamp. The sheriff serves the subpoena. She comes. And if the book says I was there, she stopped writing and looked up. Then you were there, and we're both fools. I wasn't there. I know it. How do you know it's? Because you asked me that question. At 10 minutes past 12, a copy of the page came across her fax machine, and for the first time all day, I saw the whole bottom of it. Sworn and subscribed before me. A date in April 3 years back, a raised seal, and a name. Delphine Quidley, a commissioned notary out of Richlands, North Carolina. You know her? I know the name. She's been at it a long while. Out in the margin in pencil, in a hand that wasn't the same as the signature, somebody had written 4,118. What is that? That, honey, is somebody being helpful. Meaning whoever built this page wanted it to look thorough. The subpoena went out at 12:30. A deputy carried it to a one-woman office on Main Street in Richlands and found the door locked and a card in the glass that said, "Back at 3." 3, and our hearing was at 2:30. I called Mrs. Pettiford from the courthouse steps. "Can you keep Effie till supper? Long as you need sugar." Then I sat on a hallway bench that smelled of wax and old paper in wet field utilities with mud dried on my boots, and I waited. I'd like to say I prayed. What I actually did was count ceiling tiles and think about my mother's kitchen. Courtroom 4 is small. Dark wood up to your shoulder, carpet the color of oatmeal, a radiator under the window that knocked twice and quit. Judge Emery Tillery came in at 26 minutes past 2. He was in his 60s, with half glasses down his nose. The kind of man who has heard every version of every family there is. Mr. Gaskill stood up for my stepmother. Gray suit, good shoes, perfectly pleasant. Your Honor, this transaction was signed at 10 this morning. Funds disperse at 4. I've got the motion. Go ahead. There's a duly notarized power of attorney in the file. The movant's interest was conveyed by her attorney in fact. He walked a page up to the clerk. The clerk set it on the corner of the bench. I watched that page sit there for the next 35 minutes. I want to be exact about this because it matters more than anything else I'm going to tell you. Judge Tillery never picked it up, and he never turned it over. He never put one finger on it, and he never once spoke about what was typed on it. He asked questions, and he listened. That was the whole of what he did. Is the notary here? Not yet, Your Honor. Was she served? At 12:30, sir. Her office was locked. Mr. Gaskill, do you have a witness now? I do. Roxanne went up in a navy blazer with her hands folded and, I'll say this for her, she wasn't nervous. She'd told this story so many times that it had worn a groove. Mrs. Stallings, who signed that power of attorney? Yvette did. When? 3 years ago. April. Where? At the kitchen table. Belfork Road. Why then? She was home for her daddy's surgery. She was going back in a week. And the notary. The notary lady came to the house. I felt my whole face go hot. Not from the lie, but from how easy it sounded. Then they called me, and for 11 minutes I was the most useless witness in the history of that building. Mrs. Hux, did you sign this document? No, sir. Did you appear before any notary in April of that year? No, sir. Where were you? I was home for 4 days. Then I was back at work. Can you prove you weren't at that table? No, sir. Do you have anything to show this court? No, sir. I don't have anything. That's what my whole side of it was worth. A woman in muddy utilities saying no, sir, over and over into a room where the other side had a page with a seal on it. Mr. Gaskill didn't even cross me, and he didn't have to. Your Honor, unless there's something further, I'd ask you to deny the motion. Judge Tillery looked at the clock on the back wall. Miss Boyette, anything further? Hester stood up slow, the way people do when they're out of road. I've got a subpoena out, Your Honor. To whom? To the notary named on that certificate. It's 3:10. Yes, sir, I'm aware. And right then, the back door of courtroom 4 came open, and the rain came in with it. A woman in a wet raincoat stood in the doorway shaking water off a plastic grocery sack. Inside that sack was a thin book with a soft cover no thicker than a takeout menu, and she was holding it against her ribs like something she'd carried out of a fire. "Ma'am, come forward. Are you Delphine Quidley?" "I am. You were served this afternoon. On my door. I got it at 3. Take the stand, please." She was maybe 60, with short gray hair wet at the ends. She put the grocery sack on the floor and kept the book in her lap. "State your business, ma'am." "I'm a notary, and I do closings 19 years of it." "For which firm?" "For myself, one room on Main Street in Richlands." Hester walked the page up to her. "Miss Quidley, is that your seal?" She held it away from her face and tipped her chin up to focus. "That's my name and that's my number." "Is that your certificate?" "No, ma'am." "You didn't make it." "I never saw this page before an hour ago." Mr. Gasco was up out of his chair. "Objection. The witness is not a handwriting expert." Judge Tillery took his glasses off. "Counsel, she hasn't said one word about handwriting. Sit down." That's the sentence I go back to. Everybody in that room, me included, had spent the whole day arguing about a signature. She wasn't going to argue about a signature at all. "Miss Quidley, how do you know it isn't yours?" "Because of what's written out in the margin." "Say it out loud." 4,118. "What is that?" "That's a line in my book." She lifted the book up off her lap and put it down on the rail ahead of her. "You need to see this thing because I had it wrong in my head all afternoon. I'd been picturing something out of a courthouse basement. It was thin, soft cover, bent at one corner, no fatter than a takeout menu. It fit in a coat pocket. She carried it in a grocery sack because that's what she had. How do the numbers run in there? Straight through, printed at the plant before I ever get it. Can you skip one? No, ma'am. That's the whole point of it. Then turn to 4,118. She wet her thumb and turned to it. And then she turned the book around on the rail so it faced the bench. "Go ahead, ma'am. 22nd of August, year before last, 10 in the morning. What was the act? Witnessing a bill of sale. A 19-foot boat. Who stood in front of you? Marvin Ippock, out of Maysville. What did he hand you? North Carolina driver license expired the following June. I wrote the month down. Where did this take place? My office, Main Street. And the last column, his signature, his own hand, right here in my book." Hester let that sit about 3 seconds. "Miss Quidley, is Marvin Ippock the woman sitting at that table?" "No, ma'am." Somebody in the back of courtroom 4 laughed one time and swallowed it. Now turn to the 11th of April, 3 years ago. She went back through the pages with her thumb. It took a while, and nobody moved. "I've got 3 that day." "Say the names." "A deed for a couple in Beulahville, a truck title, and a healthcare paper, a man at the nursing home in Trenton." "Is my client one of those 3? "No, ma'am." "Miss Quidley, what do you write down when somebody's in the service?" "Same as anybody. The card, and when it runs out." Judge Tillery leaned forward for the first time all afternoon. "Mrs. Hux, do you have your identification on you?" "I did. It was the only piece of paper I'd had all day." I pulled it out of my blouse pocket, and the bailiff carried it up. The clerk logged it out loud, the way they do so the tape gets it. "Movance Exhibit 1, United States Marine Corps Identification Card, Gunnery Sergeant Yvette Marie Hux." The radiator knocked. Nobody said anything. I watched my stepmother's shoulders come down about an inch and stay there. 23 years. My own family had never once said those 2 words out loud, and a court clerk with a stack of file folders said them like she was calling out a grocery order. "Miss Quidley, in 19 years have you ever written that card down?" "No, ma'am." "Any card at all under that name?" "No, ma'am." "How can you be certain?" "Because I kept every book I ever filled. I went through them at my kitchen table, before I drove down here. And that name is not in any of them. Not one line, not one time." I need to stop the story right here and say a thing plainly because it's the only part of this that ever mattered. Nobody compared anything. I never walked into that office. There is no line in that book to compare. That's it. That's the whole case. There was no expert. There was no argument about loops and slants. There was a woman who was required by law to write down who stood in front of her, and in 19 years of writing it down, she never once wrote down me. Hester wasn't finished. Ms. Quidley, do you go out to people's houses? No, ma'am. Not ever. My carrier won't cover me off premises. Hasn't for 11 years. Have you ever done work at a house on Belfork Road? I've never been on that road in my life. And there went the kitchen table. That's the part I didn't expect. Her own story is what finished her. If she'd said the signing happened in some office somewhere, she'd have had a week of confusion to hide in. She put a notary in my father's kitchen. There's only one book in the world that can answer that, and it was sitting open on the rail facing the bench. Mr. Gaskill asked for a recess, and Judge Tillery said no. And then my stepmother said the one true thing anybody said in that building all day. She said it from the table, not from the stand, in a voice that wasn't even loud. She was going to sign it anyway. Ma'am, don't. She said she would. She told me she would. Mrs. Stallings, one more word, and I'll have you outside. She was right, though, because I'd have signed it in January. I told her so on an elevator with my daddy 2 doors down the hall. That's what I couldn't stop turning over. She didn't do it because I said no. She did it because she never planned to hear me say anything at all. Judge Tillery put his glasses back on and ruled from the bench in under 2 minutes. The sale was stopped and the funds were held. My half of my mother's house had not been conveyed by anybody because the paper that claimed to convey it described an event that did not happen. He sent a copy of the certificate over to the notary office at the state, and another one to the district attorney across the street, and he said both of those things in the same flat voice he'd used to ask about the radiator. Then he did the last thing. The interest of Gunnery Sergeant Yvette Hux is not conveyed. We're in recess. Delphine Quidley shut her book, put it back in the grocery sack, and stood up. She came down the aisle on her way out and stopped beside my bench, and she didn't sit. Ma'am, I didn't come down here for you. No, ma'am. 19 years that number's been mine. Yes, ma'am. Somebody put it on a page I never touched. I know it. She looked at the sack in her hand like she was checking on something in it. You ought to have somebody look at your daddy's papers, too. The real ones. I will. Do it this week. Then she went out through the double doors and into the rain. And that is every word Delphine Quidley ever said to me. I didn't go out the front. There's a concrete stairwell at the end of that hall, with a wired glass window on the landing. I sat on the top step of it, in wet utilities mud dried on my boots, my cover still folded in my cargo pocket. I took the key out of my left pocket and held it flat in my open hand. Plain brass, worn smooth on one side where my mother's thumb went for 30 years. A plain steel ring, no tag, nothing else on it. I'd carried that key through 2 duty stations and 1 divorce, and I had never once used it to open anything. I didn't cry. My eyes filled up one time and then quit. What came over me wasn't relief either. It was the flattest, strangest kind of tired, and underneath it, way down, something that felt like being put back on the map. I sat there until my legs went stiff. Then I went down to the lot. Roxanne was standing beside her car with her keys in her fist and no umbrella. Yvette, I'm listening. They'll come after my house next. No, they won't. You don't know that. Roxanne, set it up again. Set what up? The sale. Same buyer if he'll still have it. Her face did something I hadn't seen it do in 6 years. You'd still do that? I told you in October I would. Then why'd you put me through all this? And there it was. 6 years of my life inside one question. Because you didn't ask me. The rain was coming down between us, and neither one of us moved out of it. My half goes to his care. All of it. I don't want $1 of it. Yvette. But I'm signing it. My hand, my name, at a table I'm sitting at. She had no answer for that, and I don't believe one existed. The house sold the second week of May. Same buyer, 10,000 under what she'd had it listed for, which is what a stopped sale costs you. I drove up from the base on a Tuesday in a blouse and slacks like a regular person, and I signed in 9 places. A notary I'd never met wrote my card number and the month it ran out into her own book, and then she turned the book around and had me sign it. That took me 4 seconds. 4 seconds is what the whole year had been about. The state took that certificate apart. My stepmother never went to jail, and I never asked anybody to put her there. She got a letter from the notary office and a visit from a man out of the district attorney's building, and she has not been back to church since. She kept my father's power of attorney because he gave it to her when he could, and there was never one thing wrong with it. I meant what I said about that in the beginning, and I mean it now. But nothing leaves that hall in New Bern anymore without my name beside hers. My daddy never knew any of it happened. He asked me about the carport in June. I told him it was holding up fine. That was 10 months ago. A young couple has my mother's house now. They painted the front door a green my mother would have had opinions about, and they put a swing set where the fig bush used to be. I still carry the key, and I know exactly how foolish that sounds. My daughter asked about it one evening in the truck coming back from town, and I let her hold it the whole way home. She turned it over and over in her lap and gave it back at the driveway without a word. She's 9 now, and she still asks better questions than I do. This is the one thing I'm sure of now. I needed 42 years to get there. People will tell your story for you your whole life, and most of them mean well. They get the shape of you from somebody else, and they pass it along, and after enough years, the shape hardens, and nobody remembers who poured it. You don't fix that by getting louder. I tried quiet for 6 years, and quiet didn't do it either. What settles it is whether somebody, somewhere, was doing their job the day you stood in front of them and wrote down that you were there. That's what dignity comes down to on most days. Not a medal, not a rank. One honest line in somebody's book in order with your name spelled out. And if there's no line, that means something too. It means you weren't there, and no seal on this earth can put you in a room you never walked into. If any of this stayed with you, pass it to somebody who's been spoken for instead of spoken to. And if you want another, subscribe, and I'll keep telling them.